Good evening, students. Today I am going to teach you the theories of international trade. That is Module 1, Lesson 1. The first theory is Adam Smith's theory of absolute cost. Who is Adam Smith? Adam Smith is the classical economist. And according to Adam Smith, he is the father of economics. According to Adam Smith, international trade is beneficial for all those countries who have equal cost differences in the production of commodity in which they are specialized. See, the different countries are specializing in different commodities, different goods, where the cost of production is very less. Let us assume that there are two countries. What are the two countries? That is country A and country B, specialized in the production of commodity X and commodity Y. So according to Adam Smith, the trade occurs or trade is beneficial for those countries who have equal cost differences in the production of commodity in which they are specialized. Specialized commodity in them, it means that the country country can produce that commodity and that environment is suitable for that commodity. Understand? So let us assume that, for example, there are two countries, that is country A and country B, and specialized in the production of commodity X and commodity Y. Two commodities are there, that is commodity X and commodity Y. In country A, one day labor is used to produce 20 units of commodity X. In country A, one day labor is used to produce 20 units of commodity X and 10 units of commodity Y. That means that Adam Smith is using the labor, one day labor. That means one day how much hours the labor can work. Understand? So one day labor is used to produce 20 units of commodity X and 10 units of commodity Y. Therefore, internal rate of exchange, we will get what? 2:1. Therefore, internal rate of exchange is 2:1. That is 20 and 10. Isn't it? That is the case of country A. Now in country B, one day is used to produce, one day labor is used to produce 10 units of commodity X and 20 units of commodity Y. So what will be the internal rate of exchange in country B? That is 1:2. Understand? In country A, the internal rate of exchange is 2:1. And in country B, the internal rate of exchange is 1:2. That means the country B, one day is used to produce 10 units of commodity X and 20 units of commodity Y. Just opposite of the country A. Isn't it? Therefore, the two countries' internal rate of exchange, country A is 2:1 and the country B is 1:2. Therefore, what happens? The country A has absolute cost advantage in the production of commodity X. See, this is X and this is Y. Okay. So, country A, which they are producing more, that is 2. Okay. And country B, only 1. Which commodity? That is commodity X. So, फायदा in benefit कौन से में है? Which country? The country A has more benefit in the case of commodity production of commodity X. Correct? Absolute, that means we can say that the country A has absolute cost advantage in the production of commodity X and country B has absolute cost advantage in the production of commodity Y. That is this 2. 2 is greater than 1 and here 2 is greater than 1. Here 2 means it stands for a commodity X and here the 2 stands for commodity Y. So this is explained through the production possibility curve. Understand, according to Adam Smith, the countries are coming to contact in the international trade on the basis of the labor hour they are using in the production of one particular commodity. Understand, therefore, the example as given, commodity X and commodity Y, country A and country B. Got the point? And this is explained through production possibility curve. We already studied the production possibility curve in FY BCom. Now, the diagram is this. In the above diagram, OX axis measures commodity X and OY axis measures commodity Y. AA1, here you can see AA1, this is AA1, is the production possibility curve of country A. Naturally, A stands for country A. And BB1 is the production possibility curve of country B. Okay. And from this diagram, it is clear that country A has absolute cost advantage in the production of commodity X. In this diagram, it is clear that the country A is producing which commodity more? Commodity X. Okay. Because A1 is the production possibility curve of country A, and the country A is producing more quantity of commodity X. That is, OA1 is greater than OB1. Isn't it? So, the country A has absolute cost advantage in the production of which commodity? The commodity X. Okay. Now, BB1 is the production possibility curve of which country? Country B. And it has absolute cost advantage in the production of which commodity? You can see in the diagram which commodity we have. Sorry. In which commodity country B has more advantage? In the production of commodity Y. Isn't it? So the country A is producing can produce more and more units of commodity X, and country B is producing more and more units of commodity Y. Thus, according to Adam Smith, there is no equal cost difference, but there is absolute cost difference. Full cost difference is there, and the international trade is based on this absolute cost difference. So before we are coming to the comparative cost theory, we should know the Adam Smith absolute cost difference theory. Got the point? Next, we are coming to the comparative cost theory of international trade. This theory is given by the classical economist David Ricardo. Therefore, this theory is also known as Ricardo's theory of international trade, as well as the classical theory of international trade. Now, therefore, this theory it's already written there. According to him, according to whom? According to David Ricardo, international trade occurs due to comparative cost differences in the production of commodities, not due to absolute cost differences. According to Adam Smith, international trade occurs due to what? Absolute cost differences. But according to David Ricardo, international trade occurs due to comparative cost difference. That means comparative differences in the cost of production of different countries. Okay, in the production of different commodities. Now, what are the assumptions? So, we studied already Adam Smith's theory of absolute cost difference. That means it is based on the cost differences. Because in the case of there were two countries and which were explained through production possibility curve, that is AA1 and BB1, isn't it? And there were two countries, country A and country B, in the case of Adam Smith's theory. And AA1 was the production possibility curve of country A, and BB1 the production possibility curve of country B. And country A produces which commodity more? The commodity X. We already explained that. And the country B will produce more and more units of commodity Y, which we are representing on the OY axis. Isn't it? And after that, we come to the comparative cost theory of international trade. It is given by the David Ricardo, the classical economist. Therefore, this theory is also known as Ricardo's theory of international trade, as well as the classical theory of international trade. And according to David Ricardo, what the Ricardo is saying that international trade occurs due to comparative cost differences in the production of commodities, not due to the absolute cost differences. Understood? Comparative cost differences. Who is saying this? The David Ricardo. And Adam Smith, what is saying? Absolute cost differences. Now we are going to study what are the assumptions. Whenever the theory is introducing, there will be so many assumptions and conditions. And when all these assumptions or conditions are fulfilled, then only the theory is valid. Okay. Now the first assumption is two countries and two commodities model. Ricardo's theory is two countries and two commodities model. That means David Ricardo is explaining only two countries and two commodities in his theory. Now the second one is perfect competition in commodity market as well as in the factor market. He is assuming that his condition is that whether this theory is applicable, it depends upon the assumption of perfect competition in commodity market and factor market. Now the third assumption is that the cost of production is measured in terms of labor hours, not in the terms of money. Okay, my dear students, this is the point that according to the David Ricardo, the cost of production is measured in terms of labor hours, not in terms of money. Now, fourth assumption is that labor is the only factor of production. See, we already studied in FI BCom, there are four factors of production. Not only in the FI BCom, we studied in 12th standard. Production is the result of four factors of production. Isn't it? But Ricardo is giving only the importance to labor. Now, the fifth assumption is, according to David Ricardo, labor is homogeneous. That means same, everything is same. That we will study about that. But only you study that. His assumption is that labor is homogeneous. Homogeneous matlab same. Now, the sixth assumption is that labor is perfectly mobile within the country and immobile between the countries. According to David Ricardo, labor can move only within the country, not between the countries. Got the point? That means in India, the labor, those who are working in India, only they can move from one state to other state, not the outside India. That is the meaning of this. Labor is perfectly mobile within the country and immobile between the countries. Now, the seventh assumption or the seventh condition of David Ricardo, that is free trade policy. That means there should not be any restrictions. No, there should not be any tariff and non-tariff barriers. The smooth conduction of the trade. That was the seventh assumption of David Ricardo. Now, the eighth assumption is constant technology. Ricardo is assuming that the technology should remain constant. Okay. Now, the ninth assumption is absence of transport cost. He is not considering important. He is not giving any importance to the transport cost. Okay. Now, the 10th point is full employment of resources in both the countries. He is explaining two countries, isn't it? So, he is assuming that there is full employment of resources in both the countries. Next one, 11th point or 11th assumption is constant returns to scale. We already studied in FI BCom increasing returns to scale, diminishing returns to scale and constant returns to scale. So, that is the 11th assumption, constant returns to scale. Now, the next one is 12th point or the 12th assumption or the 12th condition is that trade between two countries take place on the basis of barter system. That is his assumption. But my dear students, in the modern world, barter system is not existing. Correct? So, that we will study later the criticisms. Okay. So, these are the 12 assumptions of David Ricardo's theory of comparative cost. You understood? According to the David Ricardo, according to the classical economist David Ricardo, the international trade take place or it is based on the comparative cost differences, not absolute cost differences. What is the point? Comparative cost differences. In short, we can say that we are comparing the cost of production of the two countries. Okay, that is the meaning of comparative cost differences. Okay, now he is explaining through a table. That is, there are two countries according to him. He is assuming, he is giving the example of two countries, that is England and Portugal, and the commodities wine and cloth. Now in England, how much labor hour is required for producing wine? 120 labor hours. and for cloth 100 labor hours. Okay. Now in Portugal, in order to produce particular units of wine or units of wine, they require 80 labor hours, and in the case of cloth 90 labor hours. So from the above table, you can easily find out that which country has more comparative cost advantage. Advantage matlab benefit. Which country has more comparative cost advantage among these two countries? Portugal. Naturally, Portugal has comparative cost advantage in the production of wine as well as in the production of cloth. Okay, less labor hour is required. Advantage matlab means what? Less labor hour is required. In the production of wine, only 80 hours of labor, and here in the production of cloth, only 90 hours of labor. But in the case of England, we are comparing the Portugal with England. Therefore, it is known as comparative cost difference. Okay. So, in the case of England, in order to produce a particular unit of wine, how much labor hour is required? 120. And in the case of cloth, 100 labor hours. Okay. So, according to David Ricardo, comparative cost advantage is measured in terms of cost ratio. What is that? In terms of cost ratio. He is explaining through comparative cost advantage. We already explained, we already studied that Portugal has more comparative cost advantage in the production of both the commodities, wine and the cloth. Isn't it? Because the cost of production is less. The labor hour is using that is less. Understand? So, but according to David Ricardo, we can further explain the comparative cost advantage through cost ratio. And what is the cost ratio in the case of Portugal? In the case of commodity wine, we can find out the cost ratio by dividing. Understand? 80 divided by 120. 120 of England and 80 of what? Portugal. 80 labor hours of Portugal and 120 labor hours of England. So what is the internal rate of exchange getting? 0. Cost ratio, what it is getting? 0.66. And in the case of cloth, what they are doing? We are comparing. That is 90 units of labor hour in the case of Portugal, and in the case of England 100. Isn't it? So what will be the cost ratio? 0.91. Now, in the case of England, just opposite. What is the, in the case of wine? 120 labor hours and divided by 80 labor hours of Portugal. And we will get 1.5 cost ratio. And here clothes, 100 units of England labor hours and 90 is the, in the case of Portugal. So what we are getting? 100 divided by 90 and we are getting 1.11. Isn't it? So here, which commodity the Portugal will produce more? Portugal will produce more which commodity in which the cost is less? Portugal has more comparative cost advantage in the production of wine. Isn't it? Because 0.6 and here 0.9. So, Portugal has more comparative cost advantage in the production of wine. And in the case of England, what is happening? What is the cost ratio? 1.5 in the case of wine and in the case of cloth, 1.11. So, England has more advantage in the production of cloth. Okay, because 1.11 is less than 1.5 and here 0.66, matlab 6 is less than 0.91. So, Portugal will produce which commodity? Wine, and England will produce which commodity? Cloth, and then they will exchange. That is the theory of comparative cost advantage theory, which is given by David Ricardo. And this table we can see, we can explain further through a diagram. That means in this diagram there are two possibility curves that we can see, that is PL and EG. And on the OX axis, we are measuring what? Good X, and or we can say commodity X. And on OY axis, we are measuring commodity Y or good Y. Okay, and there are two possibility curves, PL and EG. Now, good X means we can say wine. So, the wine is measured on OX axis and cloth is measured on OY axis. And PL is the production possibility curve of Portugal and EG is the production possibility curve of England. Understand? PL is the production possibility curve of Portugal and EG is the production possibility curve of England. So, from this diagram, it is clear that Portugal has more advantage in the production of both the commodities as compared to England. Correct, no? Because OP is greater than OE. OP is greater than OE and OL is greater than OG. Okay? That means, in short, we can say that among these two countries, England has less comparative cost advantage because it lies below the production possibility curve of England, that is EG, lies below the production possibility curve of PL, that is the production possibility curve of Portugal. So, Portugal has more benefit in the production of both the commodities, wine as well as the cloth. That is the, in short, this is the basic of the comparative cost theory of international trade, which is given by the David Ricardo. Okay, my dear students, I think you understood everything. Now we are coming to the criticisms. See, in each and every theory, there will be assumptions will be there and criticisms are also there. Always economists criticize. Understand? So, we have to consider that also while studying the comparative cost theory. So, that is the first criticism. First criticism we are going to study. First one is that we already studied the assumptions, isn't it? So, we are going to criticize that assumptions, whether it is applicable in the modern world or not. Okay, so the first criticism is that it is based on unrealistic assumption of perfect competition. See, perfect competition we studied already in the FI BCom, but it is not a real thing. It is imaginary. Got the point? We cannot see the perfect competition. We studied that or everything, all commodities are same size, same color, same shape. Is it possible? No, we already studied in FI BCom. Perfect competition is imaginary. Okay, so that was the first criticism of the David Ricardo's theory. It is based on unrealistic assumption of perfect competition. That means perfect competition market is not real. Now the second criticism, what is that? International trade takes place between many countries, isn't it? Not between two countries and two commodities. So according to the critics, what they are saying, David Ricardo is saying that trade takes place only between two countries. That is not correct because international trade takes place between so many countries. In the international market, all the countries' commodities are going. India, China, Japan, England, everyone's. Okay, so that is the second assumption and that is invalid assumption according to the critics. Okay, now the third criticism, that is labor theory of value. David Ricardo has given importance to labor hours, labor is only factor, etc., etc. But labor theory of value is not applicable in the modern world. Why? Because in the modern world, the value of commodities or the value of goods are measured in terms of money, not in the terms of labor hours. Okay, so that was the third criticisms. Now the next one is fourth criticism. He assumed that absence of transport cost. According to him, transport cost is not valid. But transport cost is very important to measure the comparative cost advantage. Isn't it? Because transport cost is an important element of the production cost. If we are not calculating transport cost, how we can calculate the cost of a commodity? Isn't it, my dear students? So, assumption of the absence of transport cost is not valid. Okay. Now, the fifth criticism that it is a static theory, as it has neglected the role of changes in the technology. See, in this modern world, there are so many changes. The level of technology is changing day by day. And this theory, because he is a classical economist, he has given importance, his theory is static. He has not given any importance to the changes, technological changes in the production. Got? Now, the sixth criticism is that this theory has neglected demand side and considered only the supply side. He has considered only production. Okay? So, he has considered only the supply side and neglected the demand side. Now, the last seventh criticism. This theory is based on free trade. But in the modern world, it is not possible. Free trade is not possible. It means free trade is not possible because there are so many tariff and non-tariff barriers to control the trade. So free trade is also not real according to the critics. So there are 7 criticisms of comparative cost theory of international trade, which is given by the classical economist David Ricardo. Okay, thank you, students.